Hi guys, I'm Chris. I'm going to walk you through a short but comprehensive pre-brief for the Scale-Up Digital Simulation. So in this session, we're going to be working through the Scale-Up Digital Simulation. We're going to give an introduction to what it is, how it works, what you should be expecting leading up to our session. And we're also going to make sure that you get all of that pre-session introduction that you need before we get started on our work together. So the question is, can you take your startup from idea to exit? And do you have what it takes to really scale up a company and take it from the super early stage up to either a happy exit, IPO, or other value creation? And doing so in a highly competitive environment. And that's really the question. That is what we're going to be working on in this digital simulation together. So Scale-Up is a completely digital simulation. It's a learning simulation. It's a competitive simulation for teams ranging from single participants, ideally 2, 3, maybe 4 people per team. And we can easily have, say, 20 to 25 people per session. The goal of Scale-Up is to help you understand the mechanics, the tools, the best practices, avoiding the bad practices of what it really takes to start, build, and scale a startup. And that has been recreated in a hands-on experiential learning format that is now completely digitized. And that's what we're going to be introducing you to. So Scale-Up originally is built to build better ecosystems. So it's not just a single company focus, it's not just a founder focus, but it's also all the people, all the participants, all the stakeholders in the wider ecosystem. Scale-Up has a strong focus on investor readiness and value creation. So we're kind of moving way beyond the lean startup principles, although those are important. We're moving far beyond the early conceptual stages of entrepreneurship in action. And we're really building this on real life experience. For myself, having worked in this early stage ecosystem for about 20 years, including advisory services, teaching, education, consulting, investing, accelerated development all around the world. Scale-Up is currently being used by accelerators, incubators, business schools, innovation agencies, clusters, national cluster programs, startups, scale-ups, VCs, angel networks, and corporate innovation teams all around the world. Here's a handful from Austria, Norway, Switzerland, Ireland, Norway, globally. Here we have education, we have ecosystems, we have angel networks, and all of these are active users of Scale-Up simulation. Now, Scale-Up in 30 seconds. So the case here, my friends, is you are the 2 co-founders of a startup. Your goal is to build and scale this tiny little startup to a successful Scale-Up. And normally we have the first team to successfully raise a 50 million syndicate. That's a 50 million investor deal, combining multiple investors, and making it over the finishing line wins. Depending on the level, we can make it a little bit easier, a little bit harder, but that's generally the gist. Now, does that sound easy? Well, it depends, because along the way, you will meet ups and downs. You'll meet investors and super angels. You'll meet world famous advisors. You will have to think on your feet, develop strategies, funding structures, deal structures. You'll have to develop business models, think on your feet, pitches. You have to work with your team on strategic dilemmas, master cap table math, deal with various exit scenarios, and really learn how to think about your long-term capital strategy. You will be competing constantly with typically up to 5 other teams, all of them set on finishing ahead of you. So how do we win? Well, you win by doing a couple of things. Number 1, work strategically. And that may not become apparent until you're reached sort of the halfway stage. You have to deal with investors best possible, and you'll be introduced to potentially hundreds of investors along the way. You have to be able to structure great investment deals, handle all of the regular, normal startup challenges that happens in real life, and work hard, work fast to raise your 50 million syndicate. Now, that syndicate is typically a B series. So you may have to go through a pre-seed, seed, angel A, and then eventually a B series before you can close out and be victorious. So good luck. Here you see a couple of snaps of what we're going to be working through. You're going to be introduced to a range of different tools and canvases. You're going to be introduced to various investors that you see in the upper right-hand corner here. You're going to meet business angels, accelerators, family offices, small VC funds, larger VC funds. You're going to meet growth stage investors, corporate venture capital, and a range of different investors, all of them bringing different term sheets into the conversation. Now, very importantly, you have very, very clearly defined roles. Those roles typically set up at the beginning, where you have usually two founders. So you have a founder CEO, and he or she may be responsible for the overall team performance, company development, and he or she needs to be able to handle complexity and to see through the fog. The second founder is the founder CFO. Now, of course, for an early stage startup team, the CFO may not be as complex, but this role has to handle all aspects of finance, liquidity, cap table math, investor relations. Of course, he or she will work very closely with the CEO, but needs to be able to stay on top of cash and financing. Now, depending on how many people you are on your team, you can also add more co-founders, and you basically split up the roles. Or you can bring in more board members. So hypothetically, we could have 5 people on the same team with a founder CEO, founder CFO, a co-founder, and then 2 board members. Your unit of work is what we call the company card. Here's one of those examples. So here you can see the company card, Tourism Adventure Exp. So in this example, Adventure Exp aims to become one of Europe's premier adventure travel company. You offer tailored premium travel experience to tourists from the entire world. You're aiming for 250 employees in 2 years. You're based in Berlin, but target tourists from across the globe. You have a business model, you have some key financials, and you can see on the bottom here it says financials. 2 travel-crazed founders have injected equity of 250,000 each, and the future looks bright. So that is your starting company card as an example. Now in Scale-Up, you'll be introduced to a wide range of different company cards depending on the setup and depending on the time that we have available. But here's one such example, and you'll see as we get into more details what the other company cards may look like. There's also a case context. Now the case context may not always be used, but typically we use the Rise of the Swedish Ecosystem, which is the larger case context that you get a chance to prepare and read in advance. Key to Scale-Up are the investor cards. So here we have 5 such investor cards. If we take a look at those for a second, some of you watching this may be very familiar with different investor types and different funding stages. We're going to take a look at what we have here. And these are, as you probably see already, all of them are early stage. So for example, here we have founder cash and credit card. Now, of course, founder cash and credit cards is perfectly normal, maybe not recommended, but perfectly normal way of funding an early stage startup. Here you can see your bank offers a personal loan, 500,000 at 20% interest. Okay. Crowdfunding, also becoming increasingly commonplace. Using your Facebook group, you go for a crowdfunding round. You get 243 new investors. You raise 300,000 from 243 investors at a 3 million pre-money valuation. Business angels. 4 local angels have decided to invest. Together, they offer 3 million for 51% of the company. Now, some of you instantly recognize that, okay, 3 million for 51% may not be such a great deal. Typically it'd be a really bad deal. They have extensive industry experience, which is very relevant for your team. You fear that they will take over the management of the company, rightfully so. But if you look here, it says 3 million at 6 million pre-money valuation. Now, some of you may not be familiar, but some of you have already been able to see that math doesn't add up. Well, that's part of the training. This is part of the simulation. You're going to find what we call the conflicting term sheets. Because 3 million at 6 million pre-money doesn't really add up to 3 million for 51% of the company. As you do the math, you'll realize that 3 million and 6 million pre ends up being 33% of the company. One of the keys to scale up is understanding the combination between strategy and equity. How do we map out the roadmap and the future for the company while we also get the right investors and the right investment deals on board? So here, for example, you can see a second crowdfunding. You're running Kickstarter crowdfunding campaign, 22 million and 50 million pre-money, and you have a business angel in China where you raise 1 million and 12 million pre-money. Now, all of these are offers or proposals. It's only when you choose to accept them that they become deals. So imagine you had these 5 cards in your hands and you wanted to make an investment. Which one would you choose? Now, the first one is, of course, non-dilutive financing, crowdfunding Facebook, crowdfunding Kickstarter, business angel group, or business angel in China. Now, there may not be a best answer because it really depends. But as you'll see, once we get into slightly more late stage, the complexity increases and the information adds up. So here we'll see small VC fund, a larger investment fund, corporate venture capital, and then small VC fund again. 6 million, 24 million, plus 5 new investor cards, 15 million, 100 million, 20 million at 300 million, 22 million at 250 million pre, and depending on previous rounds. Now, you're starting to get bigger numbers, starting to get more attractive deals, but you'll also see requirements. So here we have 15 million at 100 million pre-money from Broodstock Capital. They want to invest 10 million, but only if you work with seafood, aquaculture, or big data. They require 2 other investors as co-investors at 5 million total. Ooh, okay. So now you actually have to figure out, is this the right investor for us? And do we have the terms? Or can we meet the terms that they request? Working through scale-up digital simulation requires you to be able to quickly sort through what are the good investors, what are the bad investors, what's the good deal for us, and how do we assemble the right deal for us as we proceed. For some, this is just extremely fun, engaging, and highly energizing because of the competitive spirit. For others, it's the first time they're ever introduced to a mini term sheet, and it's really a steep learning curve as we get started. So the big question here is, of course, who are the right investors for you at the various stages? Well, that's why we have the different canvases. In the scale-up simulation, you'll be introduced to a range of different canvases, the investor map, the long-term funding roadmap, the scale-up vision map. And these tools and canvases will help you make sense of all the information and hopefully get you closer to the winning line. You'll also be working on your cap table. And your cap table allows you to keep track of the actual ownership of the company, starting with your first, second, and then finally the third investment round. We also have a cheat sheet, or basically your notepad. This is your cap table math. This is the guide that helps you figure out how do we actually calculate the price per share, how many new shares to issue, and define the new ownership percentages, both pre and post equity deal. Now, again, for some, this is really, really easy. For others, this is first time they're introduced to the conversations of startup equity financing. So here, for example, you see two early stage deals. We have a business angel. They want to invest 1 million and 5 million pre, while we have a personal network, which is a much more complicated deal. Two of your former colleagues want to invest. They offer 400,000 for 4%. They have an acquaintance. He can invest 5 million divided into two tranches. So you actually raise 400,000 at 10 million pre. Then you do 2.5 million and 10 million pre. And then you do 2.5 million at 25 million pre in 3 rounds. And then you pay 2 million per country. Which is a better deal? Well, it all depends. Now, the environment that we will be working on is this. We're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive in a few minutes. But here you can see the tabletop environment recreated in a digital space. Here we have a setup for 6 teams, where we have team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then finally we have the facilitator space down here. Now, some of the things that you will experience as we go. You will experience challenges, frustrations, annoyance. You're going to be exposed to strategic dilemmas, hostile competitors, demanding investors, complex deals. You're going to run out of money and have a liquidity crisis. And you're basically going to be working through all of the real-life challenges that a real-life startup and young scale-up may experience. A lot of people get overwhelmed. They function poorly as a team. They get stressed. They get stressed out. They make bad decisions. They're unable to collaborate on strategy and investment decisions. They're unable to handle competitors, and they end up outcompeting themselves. But this is by design. Scale-up simulation is based on 20 years of experience with early stage companies, including building several accelerator programs, raising venture funds, and taking companies from idea to IPO. Personally, this is an advanced simulation that will truly test your leadership skills in action. Completely by design and with a lot of fun along the way. Some of the outcomes that we hope to see. When we finish, we hope that you will have a better understanding of the full journey from idea to exit. We hope and think that you will understand how to think more strategically for a startup. You will guaranteed learn how to deal with early stage and growth investors. You'll learn more how to think in terms of value creation, which regretfully most founders are really, really blind to. You will practice your deal-making skills, closely aligned with real-life fundraising. You will learn and master new tools for real-life startup success. And then finally, you will grow your skills in company building, company developing, scaling up, with a strong emphasis on the financing equity side. Those are some of the outcomes. More important, however, is how to succeed. How do we succeed? Well, there are 4 things you need to be able to handle here. So number 1, you have to be able to think and work strategically and deal with challenges as they come. If you allow challenges to get you out of balance and start screwing up, well, that's not a good thing to be doing. Second, you need to understand investors, and you have to crack this cap table math. There's a pre-exercise that we'll be getting to in this next video. But as you get into the term sheets and as you get into the different cards, you have to be able to understand different investors and then really crack this cap table math challenge. You also need to have digital navigation skills. We're using currently a platform called Miro. A lot of people have been experiencing and working with digital whiteboard solutions. But if you don't have, or if you don't develop, train, prepare your digital navigation skills, you're going to be struggling for the first half of the simulation simply because you weren't prepared. Finally, and most importantly, is of course, as always, the teamwork. Teams that do well work together well. Teams that break down, they're just not able to function. So you have to be able to think strategically. You have to be able to understand investors, read the cards, read the term sheets, and crack this cap table math. And you have to be able to develop your digital navigation skills using Miro as the platform. And then finally, bringing all this together under your leadership and your teamwork. Now, in advance, there's a couple of preparations that you need to complete. So depending on which case, and in this case, my friends, we have Rise of the Swedish Ecosystem. So first, make sure to read Rise of the Swedish Ecosystem. It's a 2-page case, very easily available. We have 2 videos, each of them on YouTube, each of them around 20 minutes. After you watch the second video, you want to make sure that you complete this short pre-work exercise. Finally, make sure that you stop by, set up your free user account, and get comfortable working on Miro.com as a platform. If you show up for the simulation and you never even logged in to Miro, you're going to start out with a big disadvantage. You'll survive, but a big disadvantage. Now, in terms of tech setup or technology setup, there's a couple of things that you need to prepare, and there's a couple of things that you absolutely need to avoid. First of all, you want to make sure that you have a big monitor, ideally 2 screens. So you can have a laptop screen and a big secondary screen. You want to have a good microphone, good speakers or headset. And you also want to make sure that you have a free extra device for your group chat channel. And this can be any phone or any iPad. That's your basic tech setup. Do not, please, try to complete this on a single laptop. It's possible. It's possible. You can run the whole scale-up digital simulation on a single laptop, but it's not going to be the best environment possible. A lot of people try. We strongly recommend not to. Please leave your iPad for other purposes. This is not a digital environment developed for an iPad setup. Your phone, no, not going to work. Trying to work in your car while driving, well, seriously, stop doing that. Believe me when I say we have had people that are driving towards their mountain cabin, they're in a tunnel, there's no coverage, and they're trying to log in, and they're just fucking it up for everybody else. Excuse me. So, good setup, could look like this. So here you have 2 screens, 2 big monitors, you have speakers on the side, you have an extra device for group chat on the side. It's a nice, clean, easy setup. But it can also look like this. Here you can see there's a regular Mac sitting on a elevated platform. There's a big curved secondary screen. You can see there's a phone laying on the charging device. There's a couple of speakers. This is probably also a pretty good setup. And I'm guessing here that the camera is on the laptop, slightly on the left-hand side. This, forget about it. This is not a good setup. Trying to do scale-up simulation, high-paced, high energy, strong collaboration, and you're sitting on your couch with your pet on your lap, forget about it. This is what my setup looks like. Now, I don't expect you to have the same. I don't really think anybody needs the same. But as you can see here, we have several screens. In total, there's 7 screens here. And you can see I'm running my Zoom on one screen on a small laptop. Then I'm running a couple of big screens to have the full overview. And I have a I have an iPad for the group chat communication. I also have a couple of extra lights, good microphone, and there's also good speakers on the sides. You do not have to have the same, but please try to get the best possible setup that you can. All right, that's the high-level introduction. Now we're going to switch. We're going to take a few minutes on the tour of the actual simulation space, and now we're starting to get you more or less ready for our session together. So we're going to switch into here. So now I'm inside the scale-up digital simulation hosted on the Miro technology platform. And as we get started together, you will have access and you will be able to navigate freely in this environment. Now, if you have zero experience working with Miro, I'm going to give you the 3-minute tour very, very quickly. So first of all, if you look at the lower side of my screen, lower right-hand side of my screen, there's a zoom functionality. So I can zoom all the way into 400%, or I can zoom all the way out. And now I have the full overview. Now you can see I'm at 3%. I want to make sure that I zoom back in again. I'm going to go back to where we started. So the first functionality you need to be able to handle is the zoom. Without the zoom, it's going to get really difficult to be able to read and engage with the different content and the cards that we have. Next, if you look on top, so in the upper right hand corner, you may see a gray box, or in the all the way up on the top of my screen here, you'll see a photo of myself wearing a blue shirt, and there's a yellow circle around it. Whenever you get lost, whenever you're ending up in the wrong place, you're going up instead of down, you're going towards the left instead of going to the right, and you say, okay, wait, where am I? You can just press this picture, yellow circle, and you'll jump instantly to my view. So you'll jump from wherever you are on the screen, boom, into my view. And that, of course, allows you to quickly jump to what I'm doing and seeing, or any of your team members are doing and seeing. Next is what we call a toggle control. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a series of icons. On top of those icons is the arrow. Now, when you have the arrow activated, you can grab content that is not locked, and you can drag it around, you can delete it, or just rewrite it. So having the arrow activated allows you can see the cursor here, allows you to engage with content and drag it around. If you switch to the hand and you press your left mouse button, you can now move around. And if you combine those, you can zoom out and you can move freely around. And zoom back in again. So those are the 3 most important parts that you need to know. Zoom, jump to view, and toggle control. Once you have those, you have the basic navigation skills that you need. So welcome to ScaleUp. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of the introduction, of the main setup, and show you your team space, and then I think you are ready to rock. So just like we said earlier in this video, how it works. Well, you are the 2 co-founders of a startup. Your goal is to build and scale this to be a successful scale-up. And we have different company cards. Here we have DigitalOcean Stream, Olivo, and Shopify. Different company cards with markets, introductions, value proposition, business model, and financials. So how it works? Well, the first team to successfully raise a 50 million syndicate investor deal and make it over the finishing line. But of course, along the way, you'll meet ups and downs, investors and super angels. You'll develop strategies and business model pitching competition and learn how to build out your long-term capital strategy. So let's follow the arrow. And now we are at the start pad. So this is what we call the starting pad. So once you get started, you and your team will come down here and you'll say, okay, select one character, place it on the board, and copy into your team space. So in this case, I'm going to take the gentleman with the green tie, just going to pull him to the side a little bit. And then here I have, please select a company card, make sure you get both parts. All right, so I'm going to take this gentleman, I'm going to take Swedish Mafia. And I'm going to do Control X. I'm going to bring that down here. So here you can see that the main board setup, you can see teams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have the facilitator space down here. There's no reason for anyone to be fooling around. And then we have team number 1. So I'm going to put this gentleman right here. We're going to put company card right here. Now there's a couple of things that needs to happen. This is team number 1's workspace. So we now have team number 1 character here, here, and here. We also have the company card. And in this case, your company is Swedish Mafia 2. Swedish Mafia 2 is a global lifestyle brand based on the healthy Nordic gangster living, working closely with Snoop Dogg. You know, it's all about the story, the reach, and the influence. Your market is a premium affluent users in the 18 to 29 segment, often known as VIP social influencers. You have a value proposition, you have a multi-sided platform business model, and you have 2 founders, each injecting 250,000. All right. It's time to scale, and that's your setup. Now, next, in this team number 1 workspace, you want to put down your name, so CEO name, CFO name, and then if you have more members of your team, you just add them down here. You want to make sure that you complete the founder's card. What's our shared ambition, early business model building blocks, and early scale-up roadmap. Then as part of your preparation, you want to make sure that you find the cap table, the financing sheet, your liquidity. You have your 500,000 here. That was the founder equity. And you can work your way down and see, okay, we have more cap tables. We have the investor map. We have the scale-up map. We have the long-term funding roadmap. We have the investor analysis card. We have the startup index card. And here we have our team huddle. These are the steps that we have to go through, step by step, complete before we are ready to start. Now, this is how you prepare. You come into that scale-up digital simulation. You select your character, you select your company card, you go down to your team workspace, team 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You get set up, work through the team huddle, learning to know your startup. And then when you're ready, you go back here and say, all right, my friends, let's get started. And this is the opening introduction to scale-up digital simulation, designed to help you learn how to build and scale young startups and scale-ups successfully. Currently being used by business schools, incubators, accelerators, national innovation agencies, innovation clusters, VCs, and angel networks all around the world. I hope this video, part 1, has been useful. I'm looking forward to getting started. Next, I want to encourage you to watch part number 2, which leads you into a little bit of cap table math. There's one very basic exercise you got to do. And once you completed that, you should be ready to perform at the highest level of scale-up.